I just stood there, watching as my daughter-in-law took my chair, sliding into the seat as if I were invisible. Every eye at the table shifted to me. The waiter only offered a small smile. "This way, ma'am," he said, and a frosted glass door swung open. Inside, a truth was waiting for her. That night, the only thing truly taken was not a seat, but the balance of power in this family. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I am 66 years old, and I live in Savannah, Georgia, where the humidity and history cling to you in equal measure. I am a widow. My hair turned silver years ago, and I wear it pulled back, a habit from my days as the chief operating officer for the Northbridge Civic Trust. I ran logistics and operations there for decades, and I learned that sentiment is a luxury, but tradition is a structure, which is why I kept the tradition, the mariner's table. Every family birthday, every significant milestone, we were there. It was where Arthur, my late husband, and I had our second date and our 25th anniversary. The polished wood, the view of the water, the heavy linen, they were anchors to my past, to the life we built. That life now included Kendra Vale, my son's wife, 34 years old, ambitious in a way that left friction burns. She was a smooth talker, someone who could reshape a conversation, a memory, or a boundary until it suited her purpose. My son, Lucas, is 35. He is a brilliant project manager, precise and skilled at his work. But in his personal life, he possesses all the backbone of a jellyfish when it comes to his wife. He avoids conflict. She thrives on it. Tonight was not a birthday. It was, according to Kendra, a celebration of Lucas's promotion, a promotion she had organized the celebration for. This, in itself, was a shift. I always organized the dinners, but Kendra had insisted, framing it as a way to honor him, though it felt more like a way to claim the victory. Her family was joining, the extended network she prized. The air was thick and warm when we arrived, the scent of salt and pluff mud hanging over the river. We stepped inside the cool dining room, and I saw it. The table. My table. The large alcove table by the main window, the one I had requested every year for the past 2 decades. The small, tasteful reservation card on the polished mahogany did not read Hartley. It read Kendra Vale. Beneath it, blurred but still legible, was my own name, neatly struck through with a single line of black ink. I stopped. Lucas, seeing my hesitation, started to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps an excuse. He never got the chance. Kendra, radiating hostess energy, swept past me. She walked directly to the head of the table, the chair that had always been mine, the one facing the water, the one Arthur always pulled out for me. She grasped the back of it, pulled it out, and sat down. She looked up, her smile bright and automatic, as if she were the default authority. "Mum, why don't you sit over there, next to my aunt?" she said, her voice projecting for her guests. "It is just easier for me to host everyone from here." She gestured vaguely to a less desirable seat, closer to the kitchen pass-through. The air in the room did not just freeze, it fractured. Lucas looked pale, his mouth opening and closing silently. Across the table, Kendra's mother, Melissa, nudged her sister and gave a tiny, triumphant smirk. They were watching me, all of them, waiting for the 66-year-old widow to fold, to make a quiet fuss, or to accept the lesser seat. I said nothing. I simply stood there, absorbing the shift, the casual displacement. And then a shadow fell beside me. The maitre d', a man I did not recognize, had been replaced by the senior waiter, Thomas, a man who had served Arthur and me for 15 years. He bowed his head slightly, ignoring Kendra entirely. His voice was low and respectful. "This way, ma'am." He moved toward the frosted glass partition at the back of the alcove, the one I had always assumed was just a decorative wall, and slid it open, revealing a private, quiet hallway beyond. I followed Thomas down the quiet, carpeted hallway. The sound of the main dining room, the clinking glasses, the low murmur of conversation. Kendra's sharp, preemptive laughter was instantly muffled by the heavy wood and frosted glass. The air in this corridor was still cooler. This feeling of being erased, of being managed by Kendra, had become a dull, familiar ache. The corrections had started small, just after she and Lucas married. "Eleanor, that linen jacket is lovely, but it is just so simple. It does not really match the caliber of Lucas's clients," she would say, her tone suggesting helpfulness. My clothes, the ones I had worn managing a multi-million-dollar operating budget at the trust, were suddenly mock, a word I had to look up later, realizing she meant plain. My speech, too, was apparently found lacking. We tend to avoid being so direct. It is not sophisticated. The worst casualty was my time with Lucas, our standing Tuesday teas. A small ritual of connection I clung to after Arthur died began to evaporate. First, Lucas was busy. Then he had to reschedule. Soon. "Let us do it later," became the predictable refrain. He was drifting, pulled away from my simple world by the gravitational force of Kendra's ambition. Her family, the Vales, operated on a strict diet of comparison. They measured worth in square footage and horsepower. At every joint holiday, I was subjected to the litany of Evelyn's success. Evelyn, Kendra's older sister, had married a cardiologist. Evelyn's new house is over 6,000 square feet. Melissa, Kendra's mother, would announce, "They just put in a saltwater pool. A saltwater one." The unspoken counterpoint hung in the air. Lucas was just a project manager, and I, his mother, was just a widow in a condo. They were right about the condo. After Arthur passed, I sold the large family house. It was too quiet, too full of maintenance and memories I could not afford to dust every day. I moved into a smaller, sleek apartment overlooking the river. But I did not spend that first year of widowhood just grieving. I spent it learning. I took online courses. I studied market fundamentals, risk mitigation, and estate law. I learned to manage the portfolio Arthur and I had built, turning it from a passive nest egg into an active, growing asset. My financial independence was my private self-respect. The dinners at the mariner's table were my last bastion. I always booked them, always paid. It was my remaining thread to my son, a tradition tied to his father. But for the last 2 years, Kendra had wrested control of that, too. "Let me handle the reservation." "Mum," she insisted. "I am inviting some important partners of Lucas's." With her in charge, things changed. The reservation time would suddenly shift, and our table, my table, was lost. The first time. We were seated near the clanging door of the kitchen. Lucas winced at the noise, but said nothing. Kendra charmed the important partners and ignored the draft. The next time, we were relegated to a cramped table near the restrooms. "The window seats are for the real clients," Mom, she explained, as if I were a child, it is just better for networking. I never begged. I never pleaded for my seat back. I am not a woman who pleads. I observed. I watched Lucas's spine soften. I watched Kendra mistake my silence for weakness, my simplicity for ignorance. I watched, and I held my cards close. I knew there were things about me, about Arthur, about this very restaurant, that she could not possibly know. And tonight, when she slid into my chair, the one facing the water, the one Arthur always held for me, she had not just taken a seat, she had made a declaration. She had pushed her stack of chips into the center of the table, confident I had nothing left to play. As I followed Thomas deeper into the quiet of the building, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. She was wrong. The hallway ended at a heavy, unmarked teak door. Thomas opened it, and the difference was immediate. We were in the chart room. It was not a grand ballroom. It was a sanctuary of power. The walls were panelled in dark, rich wood that smelled faintly of polish and salt. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling glass door, currently closed, offering a private, sweeping view of the Savannah River, far superior to the one in the main dining room. A long, narrow table, large enough for 20, was already set. Crystal glasses shimmered, and at each place, a heavy, cream-coloured menu was propped against the napkin. I glanced at the one at the head of the table, engraved in gold script. It read, Mrs. E. Hartley. Mr. Keaton, the general manager, stepped out from a small alcove. He was a man who prized discretion above all else, which is why we had worked so well together. He did not smile, but his eyes were warm. Good evening, Mrs. Hartley, he said, his voice a low baritone. He did not call me Eleanor. In this room, he used the name on the agreement. Welcome, founding benefactor. Kendra, in all her meticulous social climbing, had never once bothered to look into the history of the Mariners' Table. She just saw it as a status symbol. She did not know that 3 years ago, during the endless months of the pandemic. The Mariners' Table had been weeks from permanent closure. Its original owners were leveraged to the hilt. I was not. My simple portfolio was, by then, robust and diversified. I had been watching the local business journals. When I saw the restaurant was failing, I had my lawyers reach out. I made an investment, a significant one, through an anonymous trust. Enough seed money to clear their debts and weather the storm. I asked for no ownership, no profits, and only one thing in return. Specified in a private addendum the right to claim the window table, or the chart room, on any night of the year, with or without notice, for the rest of my life. The mock widow in her riverfront condo was, in fact, the silent benefactor of the very establishment Kendra was using as her social ladder. Thank you, Mr. Keaton. It seems there was some confusion with the main booking tonight, I said calmly. We were holding this room for you, just in case. Benefactor. As per the standing arrangement. Good. I will be needing it. However, I paused, looking at the long, empty table. Please have 2 places set at the head of the table, one for me, and one for a guest who will be joining shortly. Of course. I pulled my small clutch purse from my shoulder. My phone was inside. I flipped it open. A single new message had arrived just 1 minute ago. I've arrived. Awaiting your signal. I turned to Thomas, the waiter, who was standing by the door. Thomas, I am going to return to the main dining room in exactly 10 minutes. Or when I give you a signal? I tapped my wine glass in the air. I want you to return to that table. You will address me, and you will invite my entire party into the chart room. Yes, Mrs. Hartley, he said, not blinking. I smoothed the front of my dress, took a breath, and walked back down the quiet hall. I pushed the frosted glass door open and stepped back into the noise. Kendra was in her element. She had taken my seat, and now she was holding court. She was laughing, her hand resting on the arm of a man I did not recognize. Clearly, one of the important partners. His wife was watching Kendra with a look of polite, feigned interest. Lucas was nursing a glass of water, nodding at something Melissa was saying to him, his eyes downcast. I walked quietly to the seat Kendra had assigned me, the one near the kitchen pass, and sat down. I did not announce my return. I did not mention the private room. I simply sat, a ghost at their feast, and watched my daughter-in-law perform. She was so busy playing the role of host, so focused on the new, shiny partners she wanted to impress, that she did not even notice me for a full 3 minutes. The oysters arrived, glistening on a bed of ice, followed immediately by the champagne. Kendra, who had been ignoring my quiet arrival, let the waiter pour the flutes before she tapped her glass. The sharp tink cut through the air. "If I could have everyone's attention," she announced, her voice pitched for performance. She stood, though the gesture was unnecessary at the head of the table. "I just want to make a toast. To Lucas. The table, her family, the new partners." My son raised their glasses. "This promotion is a massive step," she continued, "and I am just so incredibly proud of the hard work we put in to make it happen." She smiled, not at Lucas, but at the man I identified as Mr. Thorne, the partner. "It just proves what I always say. Success is not just what you know. It is about your network. And I am so thankful that my family network," she gestured toward Melissa, "could be there to open the right doors for him." The implication was thick and suffocating. Lucas had not earned this. Her connections had bought it. Melissa, her mother, reveled in the moment. She leaned past my son, her jewelry clinking, to aim a syrupy smile at me, still sitting near the kitchen pass. "Eleanor, you just relax tonight. Dear," she drawled, each word a pat on the head. "Let the children handle the important things." It was a dismissal. "Your time is over. Stay quiet." All eyes turned to Lucas for his response. He flushed, a deep, uncomfortable red. He half stood, gripping the back of his chair. "Thank you," he said, his voice tight. "Thanks, Kendra. I am very grateful for the support." He looked at the partners, at Melissa, at his wine glass. His gaze swept over the spot where I sat, but it did not land. It was as if he were looking at a space I had already vacated. He sat down quickly, grabbing his water. Mr. Thorne, the partner, chuckled. "She is dead right about the network. Son, that is how Savannah works. It is all about who you know." He puffed out his chest. "Take my new riverfront improvement project. Everyone said it was impossible. Too much red tape from the city." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "But I am telling you, it is a guaranteed win. We have the right connections on the Development Council. The permits are a done deal." I kept my face perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. The Riverfront Development Council. After I left the trust, I had spent 2 years volunteering as an operations consultant for them. I knew their budgets, their processes, and their bylaws intimately. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the only connections that could guarantee a permit for a project like his were the kind that ended in indictments. Kendra, high on the validation, jumped back in. "Well, we are making a lot of smart moves ourselves," she said, placing a proprietary hand on Lucas's arm. "We are actually in the middle of restructuring a small family trust of Lucas's, just some boring paperwork, you know?" She waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a gnat. "Just optimizing the tax liabilities, getting everything streamlined before we really start earning in the next bracket." My blood, which had been simmering, turned cold. Restructuring, optimizing, a memory, sharp and sudden, cut through my mind. 2 weeks ago, I had stopped by their house, on the kitchen island, amidst a pile of catalogues, sat a bank statement. My eyes, trained by decades of operational budgets, caught the figures instantly. 3 large withdrawals from Lucas's personal savings, all in the last 30 days. When I had asked, Lucas had been evasive. "It is just paperwork. Mom, moving things around." Now, sitting in my cast-off chair, the pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Kendra's restructuring and Thorne's guaranteed project. She was not just climbing, she was exposed. She was maneuvering Lucas's assets, his assets, the ones Arthur and I had painstakingly built for him, into a position of extreme legal and financial risk. She was linking his future to her ambitions, and to men like Thorne. The humiliation of the chair was a slight. This was a threat. I picked up my linen napkin. I had not used it. I placed it neatly on the table. The white square, a flag of surrender she had completely misread. I stood up. The small movement had the effect of a gavel strike. The conversation stopped. Kendra looked at me, her brow furrowed in annoyance at the interruption. Lucas looked at me, his eyes wide with a familiar, terrified plea for me to just sit down. "Excuse me?" I said. My voice was not loud, but it was clear, and it cut through the room. "I apologize for the interruption. Kendra." I looked at each guest. "But there is a much more suitable place for this celebration, for all of us." As I finished speaking, Thomas, the senior waiter, materialized at my side. He had been waiting, just out of sight. His presence was a silent confirmation. "This way, ma'am," he said, his voice just as clear as mine, but deferential. He gestured not to the exit, but back to the frosted glass partition. Kendra's eyes narrowed. "What is this? The main room is perfectly fine." "Kendra, dear," Melissa said, annoyed. "We are in the middle of a toast." Mr. Thorne and his wife looked on, their expressions turning from amusement to confusion. This was not the smooth, impressive networking event Kendra had promised. "It is quite all right," I said, my voice gentle, as if I were soothing a child. "The restaurant has prepared something special for Lucas's promotion. We must not keep them waiting." I turned and walked toward the partition. Thomas slid it open. Kendra was trapped. She could not make a scene in front of the Thornes. To refuse to move would look petty, and to have her authority questioned would be a fatal blow to the image she had cultivated. With a smile so tight it looked painful, she stood. "Well, it seems Mom has arranged a surprise," she said, forcing a laugh. "How traditional. Come, everyone. Let us see what this is about." She herded them along like a reluctant sheepdog. Lucas followed, his face a mask of dread. Melissa and her family trailed behind, muttering. The Thorns, intrigued by the drama, came last. We walked down the quiet, carpeted hall. I led the way with Thomas. When we reached the teak door of the chart room, he opened it with a flourish and stood aside. The reaction was immediate and audible, a collective intake of breath. The room was stunning. The dark wood glowed. The long table shimmered with polished crystal. And through the massive glass wall, the river lights of Savannah glittered like a private constellation. But it was the table itself that held their attention. Each of the 12 place settings was marked with a heavy, gold-engraved card, propped against a folded linen napkin. Kendra, her hostess instincts on autopilot, moved forward, looking for her own name. She saw it. Halfway down the table. She saw Lucas's next to it. She saw Melissa's. Then her eyes travelled to the head of the table. She froze. The card at the head of the table, the seat with the most commanding view, did not bear her name. It read, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley. Host. Kendra's forced smile faltered. She let out a short, sharp laugh. Oh, my goodness, she said, turning to Mr. Thorne. The restaurant must be confused. They have put Mom at the head of the table. How funny. There is no confusion. Mrs. Vale. Mr. Keaton, the general manager, stepped out from the alcove, his posture immaculate. His voice, though quiet, commanded the room. As per the benefactor agreement, Mr. Keaton continued, his gaze polite but firm. Mrs. Eleanor Hartley is the registered host for any and all events sponsored by her account. We are so honoured to have you all this evening. Next to me. The heavy teak door opened again, this time admitting a woman I had never seen in a restaurant. She was in her late 40s, with a sharp, intelligent face and hair pulled back into a severe bun. She wore a perfectly tailored navy suit and carried a slim leather briefcase. Kendra and Melissa stared at her, blindsided. This was not a guest. This was an adversary. Lucas, however, looked as if he had seen a ghost. His face went entirely white. He knew exactly who this was. I smiled, feeling the last piece of the mechanism click into place. Kendra? Lucas. Everyone. I would like you to meet my personal counsel, Ms. Marla Quinn, from Quinn and Falk. Marla stepped forward and placed her briefcase on a small side table. She gave a curt, professional nod. Good evening, she said. I turned to my family. I am so glad we are all here to celebrate. As Kendra said, tonight is about Lucas's future. I paused, letting the words settle. So, tonight is a celebration, and it is also, as it turns in, a brief review of some paperwork. Lucas looked down at his shoes, his shoulders sinking. Kendra's hand, which had been resting on his back, clamped down, her knuckles white. Her smile was gone, replaced by a rigid, unblinking stare. She knew. She finally knew. She was not the host. She was the guest of honor at her own unraveling. Marla Quinn did not wait for anyone to sit down. She opened her slim briefcase and removed not a stack of files, but 3 thin, bound folders. She placed one in front of Lucas, one in front of Kendra, and kept one for herself. Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Vale, Marla began, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. I am here at Mrs. Hartley's request to review the articles of incorporation for the Vale Hartley Legacy LLC that you, Mr. Hartley, signed 4 weeks ago. Lucas flinched. Kendra's face hardened. This is highly inappropriate, Kendra snapped, her voice low and furious. This is a private family matter. And you? She pointed a finger at Mr. Thorne, the partner. Are our guest. This is not. On the contrary, Marla interrupted smoothly. Mr. Thorne's presence is quite relevant. Is it not, Mr. Thorne, who had been watching with detached interest, stiffened? His wife looked alarmed. Marla continued, addressing Lucas. The documents you signed, Mr. Hartley, were presented as a standard tax optimization strategy, a restructuring, as your wife called it. She opened her folder. And many of the clauses are indeed standard. Asset transfer, tax IDs, standard liability shields. She tapped a page. Except here. Section 3. Article 2. The formation of the management board. You agreed that the role of managing member, the one with primary signatory and decision-making power, would be assigned to Ms. Evelyn Vale, Kendra's sister, the cardiologist's wife. Lucas frowned, his confusion palpable. Evelyn Y. Kendra said that was just a formality, for the interstate tax filing. She lives in another state. It made sense. A formality, Marla said. That gives her full control. Now, let us look at the addendum you signed last Tuesday, the one that transfers your premarital assets, specifically your portfolio held at Northbridge, into the LLC's primary account. Lucas shook his head, looking pale. No, that was for the Riverfront project. A deposit. A permanent, irrevocable transfer, Marla corrected. The result of which, once the final addendum is filed, is that you, Mr. Hartley, lose all voting rights and control over nearly 90% of your personal assets. You become a passive, non-voting member. Ms. Evelyn Vale, on the other hand, would have the full and unrestricted right to manage, leverage, or sell those assets. This is slander. Melissa, Kendra's mother, finally exploded. You are attacking my daughters. Kendra is just trying to build a future. Something this one. She jabbed a finger at me. Clearly never taught her son how to do. Marla did not raise her voice. She simply slid her own folder across the polished table to Melissa. By all means, Mrs. Vale, please review the documents your daughter prepared. I would draw your attention to Section 12, Clause 4, the Managing Member's Discretionary Clause. It grants Ms. Evelyn Vale the right to liquidate any and all assets without the consent of the other members after a period of 180 days. 4. Quote, the mitigation of perceived market risk. Melissa squinted at the page, her fury turning to confusion. She did not understand the language, but she understood the tone. I thought it was just tax optimization. Lucas finally burst out, his voice cracking. He turned to his wife. Kendra, you said this was to protect us, to build our future. It is for our future. Kendra shot back, her composure shattering. She was on the defensive, cornered. Do you think success just happens? It has to be managed. It has to be taken. My family knows how to do that. But why Evelyn? Lucas pleaded. Why not me? Why not us? Kendra hesitated, and in that second, Marla provided the answer. She slid a single printed sheet of paper from her folder. Perhaps this clarifies the intent. She placed it in the center of the table. It was an email. My eyes caught the header. The sender was Kendra. The recipient was Mr. Thorne, and it had been forwarded to Marla by Mr. Thorne's legal counsel just this afternoon, after Marla had made a quiet inquiry about the riverfront project. Kendra, you know I am with you on this, Thorne had written. But this is fast. Is the husband fully on board? Kendra's reply, at the bottom, was clear. He is on board. He just needs a nudge. We need to push the final transfer through before he talks to his mother. She is lovely, but, frankly, a bit simple. Not sophisticated enough to understand these kinds of moves. We need to keep it quiet until it is done. The room was utterly silent. Mr. Thorne looked at his shoes. His wife looked at the door. I finally spoke. I did not look at Kendra. I looked at my son. Lucas, I said, my voice calm and steady. You have every right to build your life with your wife. You have the right to choose your partners and your investments. I paused, letting him meet my eyes. But you do not have the right to do it in the dark. You do not have the right to be lied to. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat. It sounded like gravel. Well, Beth, this has been an evening. I believe we should be going. This seems to be a private family matter. He did not look at Kendra. He did not make excuses. He and his wife simply turned, walked out of the chart room, and shut the heavy teak door behind them. They left Kendra standing alone in the center of the storm she had created. The heavy teak door clicked shut, and the silence in the chart room was louder than Melissa's earlier outburst. All the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving only the smell of old wood, expensive wine, and raw humiliation. Kendra stood rigid, her back to us, staring at the glittering river lights as if she could will herself through the glass. Lucas had sunk into a chair, his hands covering his face. Marla Quinn, ever the professional, did not let the silence fester. She moved to stand near Kendra, not touching her, but speaking in a voice so low the rest of us had to strain to hear. It was not an accusation. It was an inquiry. "Mrs. Vale," she said, "I have one question from a legal standpoint. The structure was aggressive, but why Evelyn Y cede primary control to your sister? It added a layer of unnecessary risk." It was the why that broke her. Kendra's shoulders began to shake. It was not the performative, frustrated anger from before. It was a deep, ragged collapse. She turned, and her face, which had been a mask of ambitious concrete, was completely undone. Tears streamed from her eyes, ruining her meticulous makeup. "Because she is the managing member." Kendra choked out, the words tearing out of her. "She always is. It is always Evelyn. Evelyn with the cardiologist. Evelyn with the saltwater pool. Evelyn who is better." She looked at her mother, her eyes wild with a lifetime of pain. "He was my cardiologist. I found him. I got him, but he chose her. And you never let me forget it." Melissa reared back, her face a mask of indignation. "How dare you? I only ever wanted the best for you if I pushed you. It was because I wanted you to have what Evelyn has. I wanted you to be secure." "You wanted me to win," Kendra screamed, her voice cracking. "You did not care how I won. You just wanted me to beat her at something. You told me Lucas was a project, that I needed to manage his assets before his simple mother let them waste away. You said this was my one chance to show everyone that I was smarter than she was." The raw, ugly truth of it lay bare on the table, more shocking than any legal document. This was not just ambition. This was a desperate, failed coup born of deep-seated inadequacy. I did not feel triumphant. I felt a profound, cold sadness. I knew this landscape. I waited until her sobs subsided into ragged breaths. I did not look at Melissa, whose face was pale with shock and anger. I looked at Kendra. "After Arthur died?" I said, my voice quiet, but filling the room. I was terribly lonely, not just for him, but for myself. I did not know who I was without him. I was just a widow, the simple mother. I was terrified. Kendra looked up, her expression wary, confused by my change in subject. I did not know how to manage the portfolio he left. I did not know how to run a trust. I was afraid of people exactly like Mr. Thorne. So, I learned. I spent the first year of my widowhood not just grieving, but studying. I learned to stand on my own, to protect what was mine. I walked a single step closer to her. I did it not to be powerful, but to be safe. I looked directly into her tear-filled eyes. "You are good enough, Kendra. You are intelligent, and you are driven. You do not need to steal anyone else's power to have your own, and you, certainly," I glanced at Melissa, "do not need to borrow it from your sister." A new voice cut in, firm and clear. It was Lucas. He had put his hands down. His face was streaked with his own tears, but his eyes were, for the first time, steady. He was not looking at me or his wife. He was looking at the table. "We are going to therapy," he said. It was not a request. "We are starting marriage counseling. Immediately. We are going to find a financial planner, a neutral one we choose. And we are going to untangle all of this." He finally looked at Kendra. "If you will not do those things, if you will not be honest with me, then we are done. We will stop here. I will not live like this." Kendra stared at him, as if seeing him for the first time. The man who had been a jellyfish had just found a spine of steel. She nodded, a small, jerky motion. "I do not know another way," she whispered. "It is the only way I was taught." Marla stepped back in, her voice all business. "Then here is the first step in a new way." She placed a single new document on the table. "This is a temporary agreement. It stipulates that all addendums filed in the last 60 days are null and void. It freezes any and all transfers from Mr. Hartley's premarital accounts for a period of 90 days, pending a full review by a neutral third party." She looked at Lucas, then at Kendra. "You will both sign it. Tonight." I nodded, turning to Mr. Keaton, who had been standing discreetly by the door, ready to intervene. "Mr. Keaton, we will be ready for our first course. The dinner will continue." Melissa looked horrified. "Continue after this?" I looked at her, then at my son and his wife. "Yes. No one is leaving this room out of shame. We will eat, we will sit at this table, and we will be clear-eyed. We have work to do." The room was suspended in that heavy, humid silence that follows an explosion. Mr. Keaton and Thomas moved with a practiced, almost surgical, efficiency. They were professionals, accustomed to managing the quiet dramas of the wealthy, though perhaps not one this raw. The heavy teak door opened and closed, and the room was filled not with shouting, but with the aroma of roasted sea bass and perfectly seared filet mignon. Plates were set down. The heavy, deep red of a Cabernet was poured into every crystal glass. The sudden, mundane ritual of a meal was a shocking counterpoint to the emotional wreckage. We all stood, frozen. The name cards were still on the table, a map of my intended strategy. At the head, The card still read, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, host. I looked at that chair, the one Kendra had tried to steal in the main dining room. The one she had not known was mine by right, not by habit. I looked at my son. Lucas was standing by his assigned seat, his shoulders slumped, his face pale. He looked utterly lost. I took a breath. I picked up my own name card from the head of the table. I walked to the chair immediately to the left of it, the traditional seat of the co-host, the one Arthur used to occupy. I placed my card there. Then, I looked at Lucas. Lucas? I said. My voice was quiet, but in the stillness of the chart room, it landed with precision. Please, sit at the head of the table. He looked up, his eyes wide with shock, and something like fear. Mum, no, that is your seat. I cannot. It is the host's seat, I said simply, not moving. This celebration is for your promotion, and this family needs a host who is willing to take responsibility for its future. Please, sit. He hesitated, looking at Kendra, then at me. Slowly, as if testing the weight of the air. He walked to the head of the table. He did not sit. Not yet. He just placed his hands on the back of the chair. I turned my head just enough to look at Kendra. Her face was blotchy and red, her eyes tracking the movement. A position, I said, speaking to the room at large, does not create value. It does not make you important. I paused, letting the words sink in. But it will always expose the true nature of the person who tries to take it. Kendra flinched. She looked at Lucas, standing in the place of power he had never sought, and at me, willingly moving to the side to support him. I saw the realization dawn on her face, a painful, complex understanding. She had been trying to capture the center of gravity, not realizing it was something built, not seized. Melissa had no patience for such subtleties. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping a harsh protest against the floor. I am not staying for this, she hissed. This is a manipulative, pre-planned ambush. I am leaving. She grabbed her purse. Lucas's voice cut through the air, and for the first time, it held the authority of the chair his hands were resting on. Sit down, Melissa. Excuse me. She spat. If you leave this table now, Lucas said, his voice flat and cold. You are choosing to leave this conversation. You are choosing to be outside the boundaries we are about to set. Permanently. Is that what you want? Melissa froze. She looked to Kendra, expecting, demanding, that her daughter follow her. Kendra did not look at her mother. She was watching Marla Quinn, who had moved to Lucas's side. Marla placed 2 folded sheets of paper next to his plate. Mr. Hartley, Marla said, her voice a low murmur. This is a list of 3 highly rated marital therapists who specialize in financial trauma. This second list is a directory of certified, independent financial consultants. They have no ties to your wife's family or Mr. Thorne. The choice of who to call is yours. Lucas picked up the lists. He did not look at his wife. Kendra watched her husband accept the tools to build a new life, one that might not include her. She took a shuddering breath. Then, she did the last thing I expected. She picked up her own name card from the middle of the table. She walked past her mother. She walked past her husband. She stopped at the empty chair beside me, the one I had just vacated. Eleanor, she whispered, her voice raw. Mum, may I? May I sit here next to you? It was not a power play. It was a surrender. She was not asking for the head of the table. She was asking to be allowed at the table, on my terms. I looked at her, at the ruins of her ambition, and saw the small, frightened woman beneath it. Yes, Kendra, I said. You may. She sank into the chair. I reached into my purse and retrieved a small, leather-bound notebook and my favorite pen. I tore out a sheaf of clean, blank, white paper and placed it on the table, in the space between us. A new boundary. A clean slate, waiting to be written. As Thomas moved in to pour water, he paused. He glanced at Mr. Keaton, who gave a nearly invisible nod. Thomas walked to the head of the table. He discreetly removed the card that read, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, host. He pocketed it, replaced it with a fresh card from his jacket, and, with a small silver pen, wrote 2 words, Host Hartley family. The plates of food sat on the table, untouched. The filet mignon cooled. The sea bass congealed. No one ate. The centerpiece of the room had become Kendra's phone, which she had placed face down on the polished wood. It began to vibrate. It was not a single, polite buzz. It was a series of frantic, angry demands. The sound of physical intrusion in the pressurized silence of the chart room. Kendra stared at it. Melissa, who had been simmering with fury since being ordered to sit down, looked at the phone and then at her daughter, her impatience returning. Well, Melissa snapped, her voice a harsh whisper. Are you going to answer that it is Evelyn? She is waiting to hear that the LLC paperwork is finalized, and we are late. Kendra, we are supposed to be at the Sterling's party. The mayor is there. We have to go now. The old world, the world of status and connections, was calling. I watched Kendra. She was vibrating with the same nervous energy as the phone. She looked at the door, at her mother, at the life she knew. She pushed her chair back, the legs scraping the floor. I have to tell them. She stammered, already halfway to her feet. Sit down. Kendra? My voice was low, and I did not look at her. I looked at the blank, white sheaf of paper I had placed on the table, in the empty space between us. I rested my hand on it. The mayor is not in this room, I said. The people at that party are not in this room. Your sister is not in this room. We are. This table is what is real. Choose the family you want to belong to. Kendra froze, caught between standing and sitting. Lucas, seeing her falter, spoke. He did not look at his mother-in-law. He looked only at his wife. His voice was not angry or pleading. It was the calm, precise voice of a project manager stating the non-negotiable terms. 1, he said, holding up a single finger. We are cancelling the Vale Hartley LLC, not restructuring it, cancelling. Marla will have the dissolution papers drawn up tomorrow. 2, a second finger joined the first. Full financial transparency, from both of us. We share all accounts, all decisions. No more secret moves, no more managing my assets. We are a partnership, or we are nothing. And 3. He took a deep, shuddering breath. We start therapy, together. The list Marla gave us. We commit to 6 months. We do the work. If, after 6 months, we are not a team, we will call Marla again, and we will begin a civil, uncontested divorce. The word hung in the air, cold and final. Kendra's phone buzzed again. One long, furious summons. She looked down. A new message illuminated the screen, bright in the dim light. It was from Melissa. I could read the preview from where I sat. If you don't walk out of that room and come to this party, don't bother coming home. Ever. It was the final threat, the one that had clearly defined her entire life. This was the moment. Kendra looked at her mother's text. She looked at Melissa, who was watching her with a confident, triumphant smirk, certain of her victory. She looked at Lucas, who looked exhausted but resolute. She looked at me, and my hand, resting on the blank white page. With a sharp, decisive movement, she picked up the phone. Her thumb pressed the button on the side. The screen went black. She had not silenced it. She had turned it off. She slid her chair back under the table and placed the dead phone firmly on the wood. She looked at her husband. "I am staying," she said. The sound Melissa made was a choked gasp of pure, venomous rage. "You ungrateful traitor!" She exploded to her feet, her chair flying backward and striking the panelled wall with a heavy thud. "After everything I have done for you, everything I built, you choose her." She pointed a trembling finger at me. This simple, mousy widow. She hypnotized you. She is a manipulative old woman. Marla Quinn cleared her throat. A small, dry sound. "Mrs. Vale?" she said, her voice purely informational. "I would advise you to stop. Publicly recorded insults, especially those alleging mental manipulation, can be cited as evidence of a pattern of emotional distress in a civil proceeding." Melissa stared, momentarily confused. "She means," Lucas said, his voice like flint, "that if you keep talking, it will cost you. Stop." Melissa looked as if he had slapped her. Her face, a mask of splotchy red, turned pale. She looked at Kendra for a final appeal, but her daughter was staring at the blank paper. Defeated. She grabbed her wrap. "You are dead to me." She spat at Kendra. "Both of you." She wrenched the heavy teak door open and slammed it shut behind her. The boom of the door was absolute, a shock wave that vibrated through the table, up through the soles of our shoes. The air in the room crackled, as if lightning had just struck. In the ringing silence that followed, I looked at my watch. It was time. I looked across the room and caught Mr. Keaton's eye. He was still by his post. I gave him one. Sharp, definitive nod. The signal for the finale. The heavy teak door did not slam this time. It swung open wide, pushed by Mr. Keaton. He stood in the doorway, but he was not looking at us. He was looking behind him, into the hall. "If I may," he announced, his voice now carrying a different kind of authority, one of public pride. "I would like to invite our culinary team to join us." The head chef, in his tall white toque, entered first. He was followed by his 3 sous chefs and the pastry chef, all in immaculate whites. They looked nervous, unused to being in this room. They filed in, standing in a line against the wood-panelled wall. Lucas and Kendra both stared, utterly confused. The chef looked at me and nodded, his eyes full of a respect I had not asked for, but had, it seemed, earned. Mr. Keaton addressed the room. "The Mariner's Table is more than a restaurant. It is a family. And for the past 3 years, our family has been protected by a quiet, anonymous benefactor." He paused, and for the first time that night, he allowed himself a wide, genuine smile. He looked directly at me. "Mrs. Eleanor Hartley," he said. our founding benefactor, has done more than just support this establishment. Her ongoing contributions, which she insisted remain anonymous, have funded our staff through difficult times. He continued, she has just given us permission, tonight, to finally make a public announcement. Her latest contribution is not to the restaurant, but through it. We are establishing the Hartley Fellowship, a new culinary scholarship that will send one of our apprentices to the Culinary Institute every single year, all expenses paid. The kitchen staff began to applaud, a warm, genuine sound that filled the room. The chef stepped forward and bowed to me. Thank you, Mrs. Hartley, he said, his voice thick. You have changed my team's lives. I could only nod, my own throat tight. I looked at Kendra. She was watching the chefs, not me. She was watching their unforced, genuine gratitude. And in her eyes, I saw the final, painful click of understanding. She had been fighting to take a chair, while I had been busy building a foundation. Her idea of power was a zero-sum game of capture and control. She was seeing, for the first time, a power that came from building, from lifting others up. It was a power she had no idea how to fight or how to earn. As the staff filed out, still murmuring their thanks, the room settled. The charged, angry energy was gone, replaced by something still and heavy and new. I turned back to the table, to the blank sheaf of paper. I picked up my pen. At the top, I wrote, Hartley Family Principles. Lucas, I said, sliding the paper to the center of the table. This is not a legal document. Marla has those. This is a family one. I wrote, 1. Full financial privacy. Our family's assets are our own, not a tool for anyone outside this table. I wrote 2. Boundaries. Love for our extended families will not be a weapon used against our own partnership. I wrote 3. We prioritize our health. We will seek therapy. We will be honest. We will not hide. I pushed the pen toward my son. These are the terms for this family. If it is to continue. Lucas read the 3 lines. He looked at me, his eyes clear. He picked up the pen and signed his name, Lucas Hartley, his signature firm. He slid the paper and the pen to his wife. Kendra stared at the page. This was her final choice, quieter than the one with her mother, but far more important. She looked at Lucas's signature. She looked at Marla, who was waiting. She looked at me. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking, but she signed her name, Kendra Vale Hartley. I will call the counsellor from your list tomorrow morning, she said, her voice a raw whisper. And I will call Marla to sign whatever is necessary to completely dissolve the LLC. Marla nodded, satisfied. I will have the dissolution papers ready by 9 a.m., and I will begin drafting a new ironclad trust for Mr. Hartley's premarital assets, naming him as the sole managing member. I stood up. I walked to the head of the table, to the heavy chair that Lucas was still just standing behind. I placed both my hands on the carved wood, and I pushed it, sliding it fully under the table where he stood, forcing him to either sit or step back. This chair, I said, my voice soft, was never about status. It was about responsibility. It does not belong to the person who grabs for it. It belongs to the person who is willing to carry the weight of it. Lucas looked at the chair, at me, at his wife, and he sat down. Kendra watched him. She did not cry. She did not offer a grand apology. She just turned her head and spoke directly to me. her voice barely audible. "I want to learn," she said. "How to sit in the right place." Thomas, the senior waiter, who had been watching from the alcove, stepped forward. He began to clear the cold, untouched plates. He looked at me, and at Lucas, and he smiled. He walked to the heavy teak door and pulled it almost closed, leaving just a sliver of light. The meal was continuing, but the order of the house had, at last, been restored. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know where you are listening from in the comments so we can connect and share your own thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.